Hi everyone. So we're back, and we're again doing this. Part 2 of rewriting NASCAR history with a metal system. This is a series that was I was inspired to do this by Peter Brook. I was mispronouncing that the last 2 videos I've done in this video. Peter Brook, not Brock, Peter Brook, his specific video on what if F1 used a metal system since the beginning. This is part 2 of the series. This is going to be covering 1975 to 2000, the next 25 or 6 years, not 25, 26. And again, we've already had some weird happenings and some pretty bad stuff. Things are probably getting ugly as we've left off right in the middle of the 70s. And yeah, it's going to be interesting. I want to thank you guys so much for all the support on the last part and over the last couple months. And I'm just interested to see where all this leads off to. And thanks for watching. Anyways, let's get right into this. Also, yes, this is perfect. "1975 saw the true beginning of the Winston Cup era, as it saw another points change. This one would be the longest lasting of every point system. Created by Bob Lavert, equal points are now awarded in every race, regardless of their length or purse. Between 1st and 6th, starting with 175 to the winner and 5 points gaps. Between 6th and 11th, there were 4 points per position, and from 11th on down, 3 points gap was how it was rewarded. Along with points based on every finishing position, a driver who leads at least 1 lap in a race would be credited with 5 bonus points, along with the 5 bonus points for the driver who leads the most laps. So, the driver who led the most would receive 10 bonus points altogether. The season saw Richard Petty take an incredible 6th championship, virtually unchallenged. With medals, it's the same story, as Petty has 3 times more wins than any other driver, and Bobby Allison jumps from 21st into the top 5. "1976 is the year famous for that year's Daytona 500. Richard Petty and David Pearson had arguably their most iconic battle. Cale Yarborough would finally take his first championship, however, after a close fight with Richard Petty. With medals, instead is won by David Pearson, as Yarborough loses the championship in the worst way possible, as to this point, as he and Pearson are tied in wins with 9 each, while Yarborough has the lead of the championship on countback of a 6-2 in seconds. But with Pearson winning the final race of the season to take his 10th win, he also takes the championship after running only 22 races, and Donnie Allison jumps from 34th into the top 10. "1977 was dominated by Cale Yarborough, who led the championship wire to wire to take back-to-back championships. With medals, he gives his retribution for the previous season and takes his first championship in a very similar fashion. David Pearson, Neil Bonnet, and Donnie Allison all jump into the top 10, and James Hilton, once again, drops outside the top 10. "1978 was the season that saw Cale Yarborough make history as he became NASCAR's first 3-peat champion, after brief challenges from Benny Parsons, Dave Marcus, and Bobby Allison. With medals, he once again dominates to take his 2nd championship. Once again, David Pearson jumps into the top 5, Donnie Allison jumps from 25th to the top 10. "1979 is the year that saw the first Daytona 500 be broadcasted flag to flag, and the historic Cale Yarborough versus the Allison brothers fight in the infield. That race was won by Richard Petty, who had held off Darrell Waltrip to win in what would be an ultra-titanic battle. Petty went on to take his ultra-historic 7th championship. With medals, DW gets the better of Petty and wins his first championship. Buddy Baker, Neil Bonnet, and David Pearson all jump from 15th, 26th, and 32nd respectively into the top 10. So, in the 1970s, things look both the same and very different at the same damn time. Benny Parsons never becomes champion, Bobby Isaac loses his 1970 championship to Richard Petty, who loses 2 of his championships and only gains 1, meaning he's only a 6-time champion. Bobby Allison and Darrell Waltrip are new champions. Kelly Yarborough loses a championship, but far and away the most controversial figure throughout the 70s is David Pearson, who wins 2 championships after only running 22 races in each. As I mentioned before, the 1970s did have a lot of change and a lot stay the same. But again, as I mentioned, David Pearson far and away is probably at this point would turn to one of the most controversial drivers, because he would have at this point be second on NASCAR's all-time wins list at this point. But far and away, if this system had been in place, it would definitely bring a lot of questions. And even with a switch to the modern era, this point system, or basically where all dirt tracks, the schedule had been reduced massively by this point, there's still ways the system can get massively exposed by not running all the races, but winning a certain amount of races to win the championship. But in the 1980s, something much more sinister, something a little bit more horrifying is going to start to become realized. '80 is the year that saw a Titanic championship fight between Dale Earnhardt Sr. and Kelly Yarborough that culminated in Earnhardt Sr.'s first championship. With medals, instead goes to Kelly Yarborough as he gets his 3rd championship with 1 race to go, in a season many believe he should have won. '81 saw major rule changes to the cars and the wheel wells themselves, as manufacturers were required to make bodies of the cars look much more like their street counterparts, as well as shortening the wheelbase. During that time, it would send manufacturers scrambling to make cars that ran best, and it would ultimately be Buick and Pontiac that came out early on successfully. Darrell Waltrip and Bobby Allison would begin their rivalry that went to the last race that eventually saw Waltrip win his first championship. With medals, it's a far less dramatic fight as Waltrip dominates to take his 2nd championship. Neil Bonnet, Kelly Yarborough, Morgan Shepherd, and Ron Bouchard all jump into the top 10, and Terry Labonte and Ricky Rudd drop outside the top 10. '82 saw the Waltrip and Allison rivalry intensify as they battled for the championship again. The same result would happen as Waltrip took his 2nd championship. With medals, it's his 3rd. While closer, he still takes it comfortably from Allison. Tim Richmond and Kelly Yarborough jumped from 26 and 27 respectively into the top 10. '83 saw one of NASCAR's most historic cars, the 1983 Thunderbird, that completely changed race car design forever. It also saw the beginning of the re-era wars that would go on to define the mid to late 80s NASCAR. The season saw Waltrip and Allison rivalry build even more as Bobby Allison played Waltrip's game better and took his lone championship by just 47 points. With medals, Waltrip takes his 3rd championship in a row, as while he and Allison are tied in wins with 6, Waltrip wins on countback of an 8 to 5 seconds. Kelly Yarborough jumps from 28th to 3rd. '84 saw a 3-way championship fight between Terry Labonte, Harry Gant, and Bill Elliott that ended with Terry Labonte winning his first championship. With medals, Darrell Waltrip makes NASCAR history to win his 4th championship in a row, as well as his 5th championship overall. And Kelly Yarborough jumps from 22nd into the top 5. So this was some cool little history that, again, I don't think people realize it, but if you were to gauge by this time, something that was very apparent pretty much throughout the whole 1980s was Darrell Waltrip was pretty much NASCAR's most hated driver. Somehow, some way, if he had gone on to win 4 championships, 5 of the last 6, I somehow think he would have been even more hated during this time period than he already was. And that's, again, slightly concerning for what could come in the future. '85 was the iconic season that saw Darrell Waltrip and Bill Elliott battle all year long for the championship that eventually went to Darrell Waltrip, despite some heroic performances by Bill Elliott. With medals, Bill Elliott wins his first championship in a season filled with incredible drives I mentioned. And Greg Sachs jumps from 25th to inside the top 10. 1986 was the season that Dale Earnhardt won his first championship for Richard Childress. With medals, Tim Richmond is champion. Okay, yeah. Tim Richmond wins the championship with 2 races to go. I'm a little lost for words. Apparently, Tim Richmond was an absolute fucking beast, though. (1987) is the season Dale Earnhardt dominated to take back-to-back championships from Bill Elliott. With medals, it's virtually the same thing happens, except Earnhardt is finally a champion instead of being his 3rd championship. Davey Allison and Tim Richmond jumped from 21st and 36th respectively into the top 10. (1988) is the year it saw the end of the Winston Cup era of the sport, as well as the end of the Air War. Don't worry about the Winston Cup era, you'll find out why in a second. And it also saw Goodyear's first tire competitor since the 1970s, Hoosier, that would become the tire wars of the late 80s. The season saw a close fight between Bill Elliott and Rusty Wallace that culminated in Elliott's lone championship, playing the consistency game. With medals, Wallace gets the better of Elliott, as Wallace goes on to win 4 of the last 5, including the last race of the year, to steal the championship, as he would win on countback of a second against ratio of 5-2. And Neil Bont jumps into the top 10. (1989) began what I call the new generation, as the new generation of drivers and fans would enter the sport through this time period. The season saw Goodyear's exit from the sport mid-season to create a radial tire. Rusty Wallace held off Dale Earnhardt Sr. to win his lone championship by just 12 points. With medals, it's the same scenario, but this time instead of Earnhardt, it's Darrell Waltrip he has to fight off, as he and Waltrip have the same amount of wins, but Wallace wins on countback. So, in the 1980s, one thing for sure is clear, and that Dale Waltrip is the star of the show. Again, winning 4 championships in a row and 5 in 6 seasons is pretty historic. Tim Richmond one completely caught me off guard, and one thing I noticed is Dale Earnhardt has only won 1 championship in the 1980s when he won 3 of them. And also, of course, Rusty Wallace has won the last 2 championships in a row. And again, we have the 1990s to get through. And the trend is going to start becoming very apparent very quickly. (1990) is the season Dale Earnhardt won his 4th championship and the first in his iconic black Goodrich Chevrolet after an intense championship fight against Mark Martin. With medals, it's his 2nd championship, this time being another blowout over the competition and to win almost a third of the races, and Davey Ellison jumps into the top 5, and Derek Cope, with his 2 wins, jumps into the top 10. (1991) is the season Dale Earnhardt won his 5th championship after a brief early season challenge by Ricky Rudd. With medals, it instead goes to Davey Allison. Allison and Harry Gann, of all people, both have 5 wins each, but Allison wins on countback of a 4-2 ratio, which actually is a lot closer than you would at least think. (1992) is considered one of NASCAR's greatest seasons of all time. It's the season that saw the ultimate underdog, Alan Quickie, come from behind to take what was thought to be an unfathomable championship from Bill Elliott and Davey Allison, with 6 drivers mathematically being in contention to win the championship. With medals and holy shit, I found a system Bill Elliott can actually win this championship in. He leads the championship from race 3 all the way until the championship finale, where Allison overtakes him and wins after Allison's win at Phoenix. After Allison crashes out of the race and Elliott ultimately wins, Elliott wins the championship with countback. Quickie goes from winning the championship to dropping to 6, and Jeffrey Bodine jumps into the top 10. (1993) was a terrible year for NASCAR, as it saw both the deaths of Alan Quickie and Davey Allison in aviation accidents. Dale Earnhardt and Rusty Wallace had an intense championship fight with some incidents on track, but in the end, Earnhardt went on to take his 6th championship. With battle, Rusty has Earnhardt's number and wins his 3rd championship by a comfortable margin over Earnhardt. In the late, Davey Allison posthumously finishes in the top 10. 1994 was a turbulent year for NASCAR as it saw the deaths of Neil Bonnet and Rodney Orr in practice crashes at Daytona, as well as serious injuries Ernie Irvan suffered after a practice crash at Michigan, and also saw the return of Hoosier to complete only to exit the sport after a rough season at season's end, but did see the rise of Jeff Gordon. Dale Earnhardt went on to put his name in the record books as he tied Richard Petty in the championship after winning his seventh at the championship. With medals, Rusty Wallace the Bandit seals another, again without much of a challenge, to take his fourth championship. Despite missing the last 11 races, Ernie still finishes inside the top 5. Jimmy Spencer jumps all the way from 29th into the top 10. 1995 is the season Earnhardt attempted the record-breaking 8 championship, but was stopped by a young Jeff Gordon, who went on to take his third championship by just 31 points. With medals, it's a similar scenario, only Gordon clinches with 2 races to go, and Dale Jarrett and Mark Burton jump from 13th and 22nd respectively into the top 10. 1996 is the year that saw the end of the new generation era. The season saw Terry Labonte play the consistency game to win his second championship, 12 years after his first, from a hard-charging F. Gordon, after a few early season DNFs. With medals, Gordon blows everyone out to take his second championship. 1997 saw the beginning of what I call the Attitude Era of NASCAR. The season saw a titanic 3-way championship battle between Mark Martin, Jeff Gordon, and Dale Jarrett, that culminated in Gordon taking his second championship. With medals, he completes the three-peat and is virtually in challenge all year, and clinches with 3 races to go. Ernie Irvan, Bobby Hamilton Sr., and Warburton all jump into the top 10, and Dale Earnhardt drops outside the top 10. 1998 saw the historic championship fight between Martin and Gordon, where the pair won nearly 2/3 of the schedule, but Gordon would pull away late in the season to eventually take his third championship and second in a row back-to-back. With medals, it's a somewhat similar scenario, but Gordon pulls away much more earlier. 1999 saw Gordon and Hendrick try to go for the three-peat, but would get unseated as champion by Dale Jarrett, who broke through to win his lone championship after multiple challenges from Mark Martin, Bobby Labonte, and Jeff Burton also. With medals, it's a historic 5th championship in a row for Jeff Gordon after another historic battle, and wins it with 1 race to spare, and John Andre jumps into the top 10. So, in the 1990s, we're now in the Twilight Zone as Alan Kulwicki, Terry Labonte, Dale Jarrett are never champion. Dale Earnhardt loses 3 of his championships. Rusty Wallace and Billy gain championships. Davey Ellison is able to see himself win a championship and defend it before his death in 1993. But the real star of the show is Jeff Gordon with 5 championships in a row. Now, in the 1990s, Darrell Waltrip had gotten unseated as NASCAR's most hated driver. Jeff Gordon would become NASCAR's most hated driver in the 1990s. But another narrative now I've noticed is running place is that certain drivers are gaining more championships, and a lot more of them. As Gordon pulls, again, this pulled off a historic 5 championships in a row would have been historic. But Gordon already was ultra hated by a lot of the fans. Somehow, just like Waltrip, Gordon may have become NASCAR's most hated driver, maybe ever, if 5 championships in a row really did come through. But another nerve I realized, and a horrifying one, is Dale Earnhardt won the 1987 championship and 1990 championship. That's it. In 2000, he won only 2 races. And then we all know what happened. Dale Earnhardt is only a 2-time champion under a medal system. And that is a terrifying realization to come across. And this is one of those moments where one system can massively impact a driver's career and make it look a lot worse, because it really does show also Earnhardt's consistency. but it also shows that he didn't have to win a lot of races. Although we do know, obviously, they would have definitely raced differently. There would have been changed strategies, but it's still really like concerning to find this out. And also the fact that Gordon now has five championships in a row, and has a chance to win more. Like seriously, people going all over the world are saying, "Is Jeff Gordon really the greatest of all time?" It's an insane thing to witness. 2000 is one of the most polarizing years in NASCAR, as it saw the incredible Cracker Barrel and Winston 500, as well as the horrible Daytona 500 and Duralube 300, as well as deaths to Kenny Irwin Jr. in practice for the ThatLock.com 300, Adam Petty in a practice for Busch Series race in New Hampshire, and Tony Roper in a Truck Series race in Texas. Bob Bonnie went on to become the first champion for Joe Gibbs, virtually unchallenged since the third race of the year. With medals, it's actually his teammate, sophomore Tony Stewart, who wins Joe Gibbs his first championship. Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Jeremy Mayfield both jump into the top 10. Well, I made it through. Yeah, this is pretty rough. I think that this is really... I don't know. I'm kind of just, I just kind of left speechless because I never thought Dale Earnhardt could be a champion only twice under any system. And I found it. 76 wins, 2 championships. Jeff Gordon has won, I think, like at this point now, at 2000, almost 50 races and has 5 championships. It could very well tie Petty in championships with 6 and maybe even win a 7th, which I really am curious how this could have been how the fan base would have reacted if this doesn't become the case. Thanks for watching this video and, suffer through the rough stuff. But, see you guys again for part 3. Like the way my hat looks.